Hello, hello, hello. So there we go. Okay, back to you, Charlie. Do you have an? No, I don't hear you yet. Maybe because yes. Okay. I have taken superpower from you. There we go.
Thank you. Apologies. I was trying to unmute myself and getting a blocking notification, so apologies for that. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Charlie. I'm a senior product manager at Nala Earth, which is a company that tries to bring nature to the boardroom. Sounds a bit abstract, but by and large, what we do is we try to let our customers, mostly corporates, know how they depend on nature and what impacts they have on nature. And then we try to reduce those as much as possible, as well as quantify the financial risk to a company based on their impacts and dependencies on nature as well. So we can talk about that a little bit later as well, if you want. But in terms of my background and my path to product management and climate, I have an academic background. Majored in geophysics and did a bit of academic career, so PhD, postdocs, etc. Specifically on looking at Arctic glaciers. So I was kind of deep into the science of climate, but then decided that I really wanted my work to have a more direct impact on climate change. And so I started looking outside of the academic world into the private sector. That's how I ended up at a company called Servest, which was investigating climate physical risks. So like what happens if climate change makes it more likely to have wildfires somewhere? How does that affect your home value, for example? And then kind of moved on from there. So Servest ended, and then I moved into a different company doing roughly the same thing called Matiga Solutions. And then I found Nala, which is kind of looking at a similar problem, but in a much wider sense of nature rather than just climate. So that's a very, very brief whistle stop tour, but I'll hand it back over and let Jaime introduce himself.
Yeah, we'll dig into some of those for sure. So I'll move over to Jaime now. Jaime and I used to work together at a sustainability tech company, so that's where I know him from. So I'm very happy that he's here. Jaime, just introduce yourself a little bit to the group as well, like your background and what you're doing now.
Yeah, thanks, Avinash. So my name is Jaime Calero. I'm based in Madrid, Spain, and I am currently a senior product manager at Maersk, one of the largest container shipping companies in the world. And as you can imagine, like the impact of such a company or such a large company, like in the environment in general, but going beyond the environment, so in the social aspects, is huge. And specifically on the supply chain. My role is supply chain sustainability. So I am leading the development of a platform that will help us as a company to measure the impact of our supply chain and make sure that we can drive their performance on sustainability to make sure that we, of course, accomplish our objectives as a company, but also like make something good, I would say. So that's what we're doing. And imagine the challenge, because we have like thousands and thousands and thousands of suppliers all over the world. So how do you do that? So how do you collect information at scale to make decisions, right? And it's not about carbon, it goes beyond carbon, right? Because everybody talks about emissions. And imagine like a company like Maersk, it's about decarb, but it goes beyond that. So I joined Maersk 1 year ago. And before that, I've moved a lot. So I have to say that I have tested both the corporate world and the startup world, always in the private sector. So I worked like for a long time at IBM. So product management in a sense. But at some point, I realized that I needed something more impactful, right? In terms of, I don't want to be a consultant working for IBM and just doing like just AI projects just because we were doing AI projects. So what's driving my motivation? And then I joined Clarity AI, where I met Avinash, and I was a senior product manager for the climate portfolio within Clarity. So basically, the use case was helping investors to make investment decision based on sustainability data. And my role was to give them metrics like, how is your portfolio aligned to net zero? How is your portfolio aligned to SBTi targets? How is your portfolio, right? And then I moved to another company in a totally different space on regenerative agriculture. So basically a product that using satellite imagery, right, draws the boundaries of agricultural fields. And we use that to make sure that you are not double counting carbon credits. And the use case was for like corporations like Nestle, Unilever, right, that want to drive down their scope 3 emissions. So they relied on us to make sure that when they buy carbon credits, they do not double count that. And then I ended up at Maersk. So going back to the corporate world, and it was a challenging decision at that time, I have to say, because I was super happy in the corporate world, sorry, in the startup world, but the opportunity of having a huge impact in such a large corporation like made me make that decision. But we will discuss that now. I'm an engineer by career, and I did a master in sustainability at the MIT 1 year ago. So that's it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jaime. I'm not sure if because we were discussing before this, like how we don't use Zoom very frequently. So if you guys want, I recommend you switch to like a multi-speaker or speaker view so you can see these two more clearly. Let's start. What I wanted to start with. So what I'm going to do is try to use this time to start off with what we just talked about, like your background, how you got here, how you feel about where you are now, and some advice you would give to the rest of the people, because most people here are either PMs that are looking to move into climate or are people that are looking for a job in product management. So let's try to blend the sustainability and the product management roles. So we'll start by looking a little bit about all of your like motivations and learnings. And then we'll talk a little bit more about like actual stuff that people are talking about now in terms of product management? What are some of the hot topics to be aware of, and regulation, AI, things like that. So actually, I really like kind of, Jaime, what you said, which was like you moved to a bigger company after being in startups for a long time. Whereas Charlie, you're still working in the startup world. I should say still, but you are working in the startup world. I'm curious to know, maybe first from you, Jaime, like what are some differences that you found in terms of the product management role? Working, I know you had like IBM where you kind of did, let's say, quasi technology product management, and now, and then in the middle, the startup. So what should people expect from these different roles, and what kind of skills are different for them?
Okay, so I would say that small companies give you like visibility, accountability, and responsibility. So as a product manager, you're basically the CEO of your own product. And when we both worked at Clarity, remember, Abhinas, that everybody tend to say that product managers are the most important roles in the company. So that's it. So the power that you have, it's amazing, because even though you are not responsible for everything around your product, you're accountable. So you have to talk about what are the sales targets of my product. I remember doing that exercise. So this is the market that we're aiming. These are like the sales that we are expecting. And even though you were not going to execute that because we had like sales teams, you were accountable for that. Same with marketing, right? As a product manager, I had to prepare like the marketing materials that we were using like to sell our products. I was also in charge of the execution of my project, and even the data piece. So what are the data sources that we're using? So there were teams doing all of those stuff, but you were like the ultimate responsible or accountable person for that. That's something that small companies give to you. Whereas like big corporations give you like a completely different environment. So your visibility, your accountability is definitely lower in terms of you are not the CEO of anything in particular, right? So your product is another product among other things that the company does, especially in big corporations. However, there are two advantages of working for big corporations. One, you don't have to fight for your clients, because your clients are the employees of your company. So that energy and that time that you spend going to market, validating your hypothesis, see if that product works, thinking about how you can test your product, right, without just spending a lot of money and time building it, right? Let's sign a partnership with one company, so they test the product, they give us feedback. So all that stuff is not happening because your customers are inside. So that's something that you can rely on. So I can say that in terms of validating hypotheses and just making things happen in that sense, it's faster. Of course, corporations by definition are not faster than startups in general, right? But in this sense, so your customers are there, so you don't have that problem. And second, if you're talking about impact, right? So when I joined the company, we were in the discussion of, should we buy a third-party solution to do what we want to do, or should we build it in-house? And we made the decision to build it in-house. Once you do that, and if you guys are interested in why we made the decision, we can discuss that later. Then think about it. So you don't have to sell your product and convince a person to use your product. So you are in contact with your supplier, so then you can get the data, you can test whatever you want. So the impact is huge. So even by doing a little thing, then the results are there. So I would say those are the two big differences, right? So small companies, it's accountability, right? So you are the CEO of your own product. In big corporations, so under your umbrella, there are like less things, which is sometimes good, because then you have bandwidth to the most important things. But then you have that capacity to validate your hypothesis very quickly, and then you have the power to just have an impact because you don't have to convince anyone to buy your product. You are the corporation that is impacting the environment, for instance, and then you have the power to change it. So you don't have to convince like a third person to buy it, right? So I would say that's the main difference.
That's super interesting. And Charlie, I'll let you come in here because we were just before this, we were talking about like how a product manager's role also, there's so much like product market fit, but finding the market for your product and building your product based on what the market needs. And so that's kind of more startup-y, right? So how have you seen this? Have you had some experience with like the different ways of aligning your role with impact, but also like what are the different skills and jobs that you do in a startup versus maybe in the different companies that you've been a part of before?
Certainly. So I have to admit, I've never been part of a big corporate, so I don't know exactly what that all entails. But of the three companies that I've worked for so far, I have been part of like one that was roughly 150 people, one that was 60 people, and now I'm down to 10. So I have a trend towards more and more early stage startups in my career. And for me, the difference has been, of course, the bigger the organization, the more stakeholder management there is even internally to get anything done, right? So that's certainly been a very different change for me working at Nala, is that there is only one set of engineers that can do things. And if you want to move on one part of the product, you have to not move on something else. So it's a very different kind of management for, how to develop the product, because everything's a little investment. There's no room for error. And you have to really understand like what is the exact value that you want to add, and is it better than some other value that you could be adding in a different part of the product. And so that's been really, really it's been a challenge, but it's also been really exciting because it means that you have to you get down to some really kind of, I don't know, I would say it's almost textbook product management at that point, because there's not so many confounding factors from external and other teams and so on, trying to adding noise to the backlog. And so I really enjoy that part. At the same time, it's terrifying because as a product manager in a small team like that, you're not just the product manager anymore. Like you have to do some marketing, you have to do some, you have to maybe even get your hands stuck in and do some coding. Like you're kind of everything as part of the rest of the team. And so, I've been doing a lot of geospatial analysis lately because that's just the thing that needs to happen, and I happen to have a little bit of experience with. So that's really exciting. And then the other aspect of it is kind of, as you already mentioned, at this early stage, there's a lot of finding of product market fit, which means so much talking to users, a lot of research, a lot of kind of heading down one path and then kind of backtracking and doing something else. And so that's a different skill set, I think, than what is perhaps necessary in a startup or a scale up that's already found a little bit more of that product market fit, where you can kind of have a little bit more certainty over at least a few months what you're doing, rather than just like what's happening week on week or month on month. So yeah, that's part of the excitement of the smaller startups too.
Yeah, so I what I'm hearing is like you need maybe a different mindset or different skills as you try to navigate that kind of a product role. So we always hear like product managers are product managers, but actually the way the role works is super different, especially in terms of climate. Like Jaime said, when you're the one doing the negative stuff and you have to kind of build something to mitigate or adapt versus what you do, Charlie, is like working with more different companies from a smaller base. So that's really interesting. So as I mentioned, a lot of people here are trying to find their path in product management. How did you find, we'll start with you, Charlie. So how did you decide to like how did you choose Nala, and maybe looking back, like what are you happy about that this role gives you that other roles maybe didn't, and then how can you kind of use that as maybe some advice to the people that are looking to figure out like what kind of role they should be looking for?
Yeah, sure. So how I arrived at Nala is kind of a follow-on from how I arrived in the field in general, which is when I was deep time back, I remember even being in primary school and hearing about the greenhouse effect and thinking, oh my God, somebody needs to do something about this. Like, this sounds terrible. Like, why isn't this bigger problem? And so in the back of my mind, like not always at the forefront, it's not been this like leading thought throughout my life or anything, but I always thought it would be nice to work in a field that tackles this big issue that we're facing. And so when I did a geoscience degree and I was like, okay, well, looking to move out of it, I did think, well, I would really rather like to use my scientific skills and my background for something as impactful as climate change. So initially, when I looked for jobs in the private sector, and I wasn't necessarily set on being a PM, I didn't actually know what a product manager was at that time. But I did find a job. Like I did know that I liked organizing things and I liked arranging logistics and so on. And so I started looking for jobs that kind of met those skill sets as well as the scientific side. And I looked around in the area. I looked for, companies that were looking to make an impact that also leveraged kind of other skills that I had, like these geospatial skills, for example. And then found a job that was listed as program manager, applied for it, got it. And then I arrived, and within a week, the company reorganized and all program management was eliminated. And so I was offered instead a product job, which is, fantastic. I didn't know until then, like a little light bulb came on for me when I started this job. I was like, wow, this is great. This is the exact kind of stuff I like to do. So that's how I found product management in general within the climate space. It was a sort of mini lateral move for me. And then in terms of how I would, I guess I would say that as an advice to everybody, like don't be too specific about what you apply for, because especially in the startup world, like you can make little changes to move into a role that suits you very well as well, just by showcasing your skills. And if there's something that matches 80% what you're looking for, give it a go and see if you can't turn that into 100%.
Cool. Yeah, very cool advice. Yeah, I can second that as well. In a startup, like I joined the company because they had a vacancy in like client service, and then I worked on the product so well that they're like, "Hey, we need a product manager for this product." Like, hi, I can do it. I know the product really well already, and the client. So yeah, there's always opportunities within. Sometimes you have to bide your time. But what I thought was very cool, what you said was like you came from kind of the climate, earth sciences space, and moved into product management. We'll switch over to Jaime. So the same question for you, like how did you get to where you are now, and what in your previous product management experience kind of led you here? You mentioned some in your intro already, but I'm interested to see like how you then got into climate, and how you continue to use that, to grow your career. And as I'll pause here before I let you answer, is that all of you, if you're interested in learning more about like what companies need to do for the climate, you should definitely follow Jaime on LinkedIn, where he posts some cool videos every now and then, short videos about the corporate context for climate as well. But yeah, over to you, Jaime. And also for the rest of you, if you have questions for the panelists, just write them down in the chat. And yeah, I can pose that to them as well as we go on. So Jaime, yeah, floor is yours.
Thanks, Avinash, and thanks for selling my LinkedIn profile. Thank you. I'm going to slow down a little bit because I've read some comments saying that it looked like your reproduction was 2x. So I'm going to slow down because the people tend to say that Spanish people speak very fast. So I'm going to slow down. I have to say one thing. Very few people that I know that are product managers have ended up in this space, like proactively thinking that they wanted to be product managers, right? So very few of them, right, came to this space thinking about that. So, and I want to link back to one of the things that you guys were saying, right? You can apply for a product management role. And when I jumped in, and when I moved into the product management role, I was coming from IBM, and the question was, how many years of experience do you have as a product manager? And when I made that movement, right, I had two options: either saying 0, because I was never officially a product manager because I was a consultant, I was a project manager, I was a program manager. But in the end, when you see like what a product manager is a little bit of everything. So you need to know about technology. You need to know about strategy. So what's the strategy of your product? Because you're expected to define the strategy of your product. You have to be a good, like, I'm not going to say speaker, but you have to have the skills of selling your idea and your product, right? And present it in a way, especially if you're working for a startup, because you have to sell your product. So it's not about, look at this nice product that I have, but then you're not able to articulate the value proposition and the value that you're delivering. So I would say, if you guys are planning to move into product management and you think that you have not had product management experience, that's not true. Because I'm sure that most of the things that you've done so far can be framed as product management. And then you can sell yourselves as junior product managers in a way if you're not there yet. So that's how I see it. And then within the product management space, you have like, it's not like a very rigid definition. So there are companies where you have product managers and product owners. So then the product managers do more the strategy side of it, and then the product owners take care more of the execution of the product, which is basically working with the tech team, using Jira, and making sure that you have like all your user stories with your acceptance criteria. There are companies where you do both, right? You are like the strategist of your product and then the executor of your product. There are companies where you make sure that you drive the success. So you sell your product and then you're there with your clients to make sure that they're successful in using your product. There are places where you are not in charge of that. So product managers, right, can be multiple things at a time. That's what I said at the beginning. You are the CEO of your product, and CEOs do a little bit of everything. So that's how I would like describe how I got into product management. I mean, I was never officially a product manager, but I mean, in fact, I was, right? Just because what I did before. And how I came into climate. So, I mean, this might sound a little bit like, I don't know, just typical thing that you say, passion, motivation, right? So we all want to be passionate about our work and what we do, and fine. But trust me that makes the difference. So I was working for IBM, and yeah, so I was just doing one AI project for one company, so to reduce the amount of calls they're receiving in their contact center. And at the end, I asked myself, so what if I stop doing my job? So what would be the impact? And the answer was nothing. And at that time, you're going to laugh, but I was super. I was like watching all the BBC David Attenborough series, right? So I was super passionate about that. But at that point was okay. But how can I make this topic like my way of living? And that's where I made the connection. So I was at IBM. I had that product or technical background, project management, product management, and program management. Then I had that passion. And then I had the opportunity to join Clarity, right? Well, before Clarity, I had the opportunity of helping Facebook to measure the impact of bringing internet to the whole world, to the different SDGs, right? The SDGs were released in 2015, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the SDGs were just like very genetic things. So how to measure that? So I had the opportunity of joining that project. That was a part-time project for me. And I realized that, okay, so there's a way, right, to live, right, with your passion. So after that, I realized I don't want this to be a part job. I want this to be like a full-time job. And then I had the opportunity of joining Clarity. And what made me ready to join a company like Clarity, because they were looking for a product manager on climate. I was not an expert on climate. And I was at that time, I was not officially a product manager, but I rely on what I did in the past at IBM, right? So I just built the case to paint myself as a product manager, even though I was not. I hadn't been a product manager since then. Plus, I used what I learned in that small project that I did with Facebook to sell that well, I can do this job. And I'm going to finish by saying, in this market, there is an excess of demand and a lack of supply. So a lot of people are looking for roles in climate, but very few people are super prepared to do these jobs. And what I mean by that, there's a lot of people working on sustainability, or on the communication public relations side. But what I tend to say is that sustainability, it can be super boring because it's a matter of measuring things and proving things. So how do you measure that your suppliers are meeting like third-party labor standards in your company? So it's not about selling the idea, it's about measuring, and measuring it, I mean, it can be boring. So when you go into the facts, measure, get the data, to do that stuff, that level of granularity, that's where there's a lack of skills in the market. And that's why if you get there, so if you go beyond just the pure strategy on climate, because most of the people do strategy on climate, but if you get into how to execute that, how to measure things, then that's what makes the difference. So there's one space for you there. So product management, and having like a domain expertise because you've done like your little things in climate that can help you. I've extended myself a lot. Sorry, Avinash, but
I'll let you take a short break. No, but I think this is super interesting that, yeah, we sometimes see it as like the school role and we're going to be saving the world. But actually, like when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, you may have to spend some time doing boring stuff. You will have to spend some time doing boring stuff. This is how it makes. So you have to be prepared for that. I like that. I'm going to take a couple of questions from the chat, one I quite liked, and I'll go to you first, Charlie, which is about like what does a day in your life look like? And specifically, I'm thinking like where are you using more your climate knowledge, your scientific knowledge, and where are you trying to push more on the business side, the product management side, and maybe where more on the technical engineering side. So in a typical day, kind of what kind of things do you do and what skills are you using most frequently?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say that, like, I mean, as ever, no day is the same. And also at the different places I've been a product manager, the days look very different too. So I say it depends on the company, it depends on the stage of the company and like the type of role that a product manager fills there. But currently, I would say at this very early stage, I would say like a typical day would involve talking to one of our prospects or one of our users about their needs. So like at that stage, I'm using a lot of my background to both understand what the user is doing, like from a process point of view, and also trying to explain back because our product is quite scientific, uses a lot of technical data. So trying to kind of come at like a mutual understanding of what we're doing and explaining any questions that the customer might have. And at the same time, wearing my PM hat, trying to figure out how I can make this better, right? Like how I can add real value to this process for the customer. So that might be a little bit of the start, but then a lot of the rest of the day will be about driving alignment with the team. So talking to people in sales, talking to my engineers, talking to the other product people, and trying to figure out like what can we make now that adds the most value to this kind of user feedback that we've been receiving and to kind of really act on that. So there's a lot of talking basically is what what my life looks like. But at the same time, I'm really blessed. At the current company I work at, we have very few meetings. So for once, for the first time in my career, I've had a lot of like meeting-free days where I can actually do deep work, which involves reading a lot. I do a lot of research into, currently there's a lot of uncertainty around policy, for example, what is going to happen with regulations? How is that going to affect our business? As well as, looking into different processes, also data sets, doing a lot of the kind of like fact finding about what can really be a big business opportunity for the type of data that we deliver and how can we leverage that. So there's a balance there. I also spend a fair bit of time in Figma. Like it really just depends on what is kind of current. But yeah, typically my day will be a balance of talking to people and doing deep work relating to kind of opportunity assessment and value propositions.
Cool. I think that's really good. That's how a typical PM should be spending the day, not yelling at people or not like always. Some people say like, oh, you just have a whip to your development team, and that's the job of a PM. So I completely agree, I think. And this is kind of to Jaime's point before. It's like you can come into PM from so many different angles, and because you need so many different skills, it's quite transferable. And someone mentioned that as well in the chat. So it's all about like leaning into those skills that you have and then being able to build others. Cool. Jaime, maybe another question for you, or if you want to come in on that, that's also good. But I wanted to ask you a little bit let's go a little further on that idea of what are some skills that you can bring, like hard skills, soft skills, um, that someone maybe who isn't a PM can bring to get into the space, and maybe if there's anything specific that they can do in relation to climate or sustainability as well.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a fact, right? Within the product management community in Maersk, I am the only product manager with domain-specific background. So they hired me because they were looking for a person with background in this domain. My point here is all the others are doing products around like the business as usual for Maersk, which is basically running our vessels, hiring suppliers, right, to deliver the services. So there is, to me, like a big difference. So big corporations like Maersk hire people for product management roles with no experience in, I don't know, so shipping, procurement, whatever. But then they do look for people with domain-specific background. So that's the good thing, and I want to link back to what I said before, right? In this space, if you can demonstrate that you've gone a little bit farther from just being a communications or a peer person on sustainability, and then you have like launched a product and you have demonstrated that you can measure things. So what is the value case for sustainability, right? Then they are going for you. So in terms of hard skills, I would say you don't have to be super expert in sustainability, right? So for instance, Scope 3 emissions. So we are now building a product in Scope 3 emissions. I did that in when I was working for Clarity AI. I'm not an expert, but I can say that I delivered one product to measure Scope 3 emissions for corporations. So it is measuring that. So I was giving a number to like all listed companies in the world saying, this company is doing this, blah, 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 blah. So that level of detail, right? Knowing that in climate is like the market is valuing that. In other fields, they tend to assume that if you don't have the domain expertise, you will get it as you move. So if you want to get yourselves in the space, if you can demonstrate that you have done a little, then that will make a difference. That is the fact. Of course, hard and soft skills for the product manager. I don't think there's anything in particular different for PMs in climate than in any other sector. I mean, the only difference that I see is in this case, having like a domain expertise can make the difference, right? And because right, and I'm going to finish by saying this. In other sectors, right, you are not reinventing the wheel, right? So you're just doing or solving problems that for industries that have been here for quite a long time. But in climate, we were not conscious about this topic like 10 years ago. So now there are problems out there that before they were not even a problem. So there are problems coming here. Nobody has thought about them before. There are new technologies out there, but how do you use those technologies? So being super in contact with what the market is doing, what technologies are out there. So knowing, for instance, that you can use satellite imagery and use like to measure the carbon density of a forest, and that will tell you whether there has been deforestation in one forest, and that there are companies that are providing you that data, and that you can put that in your product. And so all that thinking, right? This is a super new space, so nobody has thought about that, right? So you have to be super up to date on what technologies are out there to solve the problems, because the problems that you're facing as climate experts or climate PMs, nobody has solved them before. Whereas other PMs in other industries, like, I don't know, so I'm working for a platform like Uber, or I'm working for another platform like Amazon. Yeah, so of course they're solving new problems, but that's not new, right? But in here, nobody has ever thought about measuring like the impact of factories throwing chemicals into the water, and then measuring the impact on the biodiversity of the area surrounding the factory. So how do you measure that?
Yeah. Oh, that's super interesting. I think that that's one thing that a lot of people can take away today, is that you have to deal in some things as completely new. So if you have experience with doing something completely new, that's also transferable into kind of climate PM role.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So, okay. Now, before I want to go into some like more, let's say, technical questions in the last 15 minutes, but I want a like a quick answer from both of you, very like short on what is like maybe one or two skills that you have observed from other PMs that you've worked with that you've really liked, and you was like, okay, I want to, maybe you don't want to be that person, but what's some things that you've kind of been inspired by? Charlie, I can start with you.
I mean, it's a really, maybe this is like a bit of a corny one, but honestly, for PM, I think the main skill that sets you really apart is effective communication and clarity. Like being able to like distill clarity from a whole bunch of different conversations and present that really clearly to who it needs to be presented to. That is like the most valuable skill you can have, because that means that you can pitch, it means that you can clarify, it means that you can align other people and find the real value. So it's both analytical and communicative. But yeah, that would be my and the sort of the PMs that I look up to are all really great at that. So yeah, that would be my quick answer.
Yeah, that's really cool, because that's also in climate, in the space, it, like you say, it's unstructured, it's complex. So if you can bring clarity through that complexity is, yeah, I fully agree. Jaime, anything to add from your side?
Two things. Always go back to the problem. So if you have a problem, but you don't know why that is a problem, then don't spend time on that. Because if someone says, I need a filter, okay, why? And then if you are not able to articulate why, then that is not a problem. Then don't solve it. Don't spend time on that. That's like, I live by that idea. And second, you are not the user of your product. So please, like when you are designing it, do not spend a lot of time thinking about whether you have to put the button up here, or where you have to do this nice thing. You are not the user of your product. In the absence of data, go to the market, test your product, get feedback. You will realize that almost always you don't have to change your initial decision. Don't spend time on that. You're not the user of your product. And always go back to the problem. If there's no why to the problem, then that is not a problem.
Well, very well said. Thanks. Okay, so yeah, to those of you doing interviews, take notes, right? When they ask you what kind of ethos you have for your product management, these are the things you have to say. That will definitely impress the interviewers. Okay, so in the last less than 15 minutes now that we have, let's say 10 minutes, I wanted to try and talk a little bit about technical things. So specifically, like, I want to try and understand from both of you, and this is a question that came in the chat actually, the challenges you have in the climate sector. So the challenges of the sector in general, sustainability, climate, that you face in your job, and how does it impact the work that you do? Um, Hopefully that's clear. So like, how does the context and the market affect the way you execute or the way you strategize? Charlie, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think it kind of relates to what Jaime was saying before, which is that because this is all so new, it isn't always clear what problem you are able to solve for the user, because there is so much, it's developing so fast that even in your collaboration with a prospect or a customer, and like the needs might change all the time. We know, for example, that these, CSRD regulations, for example, a lot of policies are being weakened, and so something that seemed like a really strong use case even a few months ago could turn into something that's less relevant really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a bit of staying on top of things, like and being like constantly aware of this challenge that can come out of nowhere. I think that's true for any field, but I think it's especially true in climate. And then in addition to that, there's the complexity of the topic. I think one thing that I find is that a lot of the climate and language around nature in particular, it's very scientific. It's very specifically in the field that I work in. It's it's been sort of like living in this academic world for a very long time, which means that there's a vocabulary, a language, and also an attitude of like being very conservative around, is this data good enough? Like, are the scientific methods that we're using great? Like, is it all solid and iron and like, watertight before we can publish or take it to the market? Whereas the corporate world and the private sector doesn't want to work like that. They want to be fast. There's like, you want to be able to release, you want to be able to just test something. And so these two worlds meeting in a scientific product can be quite challenging, because it means that sometimes you have to work with scientists who are used to being really careful. And then at the same time, you have a stakeholder that's more businessy and they want to kind of just get things out. And so that's kind of a more day-to-day challenge that I say I cope with as well in my job, that, kind of trying to balance these two viewpoints and meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, cool. Really interesting. Jaime, over to you. What challenges are you facing? I know we spoke about it before, but whatever you
No,
want to share. Yeah.
to me, there's one challenge here.
Mm.
And I think that very few people are thinking about this. So what's the value case for climate? Trust me that the only driver for sustainability agendas in corporations is compliance. So, because if you're not able to demonstrate how being more sustainable affects the bottom line, so is it driving more revenue? Is it driving cost savings? So if you're not able to demonstrate that, then you are restricted by compliance. And what is happening now? So the regulatory landscape is changing. Look what's going in the US. There's a very strong pushback. Think about in the European Union. So with the omnibus package, so what's Maersk doing? So there are certain things that we're doing in terms of reporting to CSRD, etc. So let's wait a few months and see what's going on, because we don't want to build anything and then just throwing it down. So then, does that mean that once you're compliant and once regulatory requirements are out, then there's no agenda, right, for sustainability? So if you don't start thinking about it, then, and I am facing that challenge now, because in Maersk, we're thinking about like, what is the strategy for next year? So I need to present to the leadership of the company, why should they keep investing money in climate? And if I focus on, so there's a potential penalty of non-compliance, but they would say, that's potential and regulations are changing. What else? That's a hard one. So I've spent a lot of time in Q1 thinking about what's the value case. So how can we translate that into a number, right? Based on, because I mean, you can build a business case and put numbers, right? So PowerPoints and Excel support everything. So it's a matter of, if you look into the past of your company, so can you take some data point that says, yeah, look at what happened. And so if you extrapolate that, then it can happen again, right? To me, that's the most important challenge. So what is the value case for sustainability beyond compliance?
Yeah. And I think this basically leads me to what will be the last question, so because I want to make sure we have enough time for it. Like what you said, it shows, and actually what we all know, there's a lot of people that want to get into PM climate. There's not enough roles, obviously. So it is very challenging. What maybe I'm trying to understand from you, because you both worked in different places as well. Like, what are some, I'm not going to call it alternatives, but what are some different places that people should look that they maybe are not as hot or not as, well thought of or well known, I should say, that you can also make a positive impact in, and that they can maybe then find their way into climate or something like that. But a PM role in a different place. Any thoughts about that, Jaime?
So think about this. So the market, so if you start looking about what companies or how companies are positioning themselves in the market around sustainability, so they're removing like words around sustainability, ESG light from their reports, and they're talking about more about resilience. So then the scope of climate and sustainability, right, increases. So that means that supply chain resilience, for instance, so how do you make sure that as a company you can be resilient? So we're a container shipping company. So think about what happened last year in the Panama Canal. No rain, water levels going down. So then we have to find alternative routes. So that's, you can frame that as climate, but you can frame also as supply chain resilience. So we need to make sure that we are resilient, right? And resilience is now super linked to climate. So it's just about how you position yourselves and how you look at it. If it's pure climate, of course you're probably narrowing down, especially now, right? But if you like position yourselves as no, this is about, and I'm talking about supply chain because this is what I do right now, right? But supply chain resilience, right? And that topic, right, these days is becoming more trendy. So you can find roles in not pure like climate measurement thing, but you can be like supply chain resilient PM because you need to build a product to measure the resilience of your suppliers. We have roles inside Maersk with that. They're not purely climate, but they are connected somehow because resilience right now is tied to sustainability. So, I mean, that's one particular example, but. We are not hearing you, Abhinash. Is it only me? I can hear you.
No, I muted
Okay.
myself to
Okay.
type and then forgot to unmute. No, I was just gonna say that's really good because you talk about the chain and like where you can find your way in the next step. That's important. Yeah, Charlie, I'll bring you in here if you have any thoughts based on people you know, your own background. What works or what should people be looking at as an alternative?
So I mean, also because Jaime and I both work in kind of, well, I work in B2B SaaS and Jaime, you work in large corporate. Like we haven't really been talking much about B2C or any other kinds of, solutions or various other kinds of, companies and products that are related to solving the climate crisis in a different way. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there actually, especially now that the corporate like sustainability landscape is looking a little bit fragile, shall we say, with the compliance angle and everything. So I would say like there are a number of interesting. There's so many interesting ideas out there for how to improve, climate or how to reduce the impact of climate change or how to mitigate climate change in kind of direct to consumer applications or even in related fields that then can have positive impacts on climate as well. One thing that I found really helpful to me to kind of look at different ways of helping in the climate crisis was actually looking through the Project Drawdown website, where there are a lot of fields related to climate that don't seem related to climate at all. I mean, there's a whole section on, female education, for example, that's shown to have positive impacts on climate change. So maybe you can find a related role that has an impact on climate that doesn't necessarily feel like it's in climate tech necessarily. So that would be a really good source of looking for other places that you could potentially look for roles and still have that positive effect that you're looking for.
Yeah, and if I can add, you can also look at different roles, not as PMs within climate. So for instance, all data-related roles, right? Or metrics or measurements. So if you're interested in that, we are right now, for instance, hiring people, right? And we are building models to estimate metrics about our supplier base, because I mean, we have 35,000 suppliers. Some of them are located in countries where they don't even have the technology to tell us what their like emissions are, etc. So then you have to rely on AI and technologies, right, to build models that can estimate like their footprint without even asking them. So it doesn't have to be a product management role. You can start by just, if you're interested in the data side, you can also test that. And then you can easily move into product management, because most of the like climate related products are based on data. At the end, what I told you at the beginning, climate or sustainability can be boring because it's about measurement. It's not about strategies, and because if you cannot execute a strategy and justify that your strategy is being executed, then that's another angle to explore. So the data side of it.
Yeah, cool. All right, so we're at the hour. I'll end it there. Thank you both for your time. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, so I've saved down the questions, and if we can, we'll respond to some of them on the Work on Slack channel as well. But yeah, thank you all for your time, and thanks everyone for being here. I think hopefully it was helpful, and hopefully it was just good to hear from real product managers about the work they do, and yeah, how that's shaped them. So have a good evening, everybody. Thanks, Jaime. Thanks, Charlie, as well.
Thank you very much.